All right. Hello again, adventures, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2023. This is day 16. See, numbers are hard. By the way, if anyone's wondering why every time I say the date, I always look away, it's because I'm looking at the date on my computer because I can't actually remember how time works. So today, I have been a little bit stuck on this idea that I had previously where I just choose video games or books or things like that and give suggestions on how to use an already created tabletop RPG to basically replicate the experience. And thus far, I've been doing exclusively video games because video games are a big part of my life. But I want to do it again. So today, we're going to talk about a game series I have been obsessed with since Monster Hunter 4 was my first one. And it is an incredibly fun system. They just, or game, they just announced that a new one called, I think it's called Monster Hunter Wilds, is going to be coming out in the next few years here. We're going to get more information, I think, this coming summer. But they did give a teaser trailer that looks amazing. And it looks like a proper follow-up to Monster Hunter World, which is currently one of my favorites. I really like Monster Hunter Generations. Because I started with 4, but I got really into Monster Hunter for Monster Hunter Generations, and I put like 100. That was the first Monster Hunter game that I put over 100 hours into. And it's still, I love the style system where you could just change your style and it would massively change how each weapon worked. Like, I wish they would bring that back. They kind of did with like the switch skills, but they didn't quite work as well, and they were extremely limited. I really wish they would have added a lot more switch skills. But that being said, yeah, I really like Monster Hunter, and having looked through so many RPGs, I think there is a very easy choice for an RPG that would allow you to replicate most, if not all, of the features of a Monster Hunter game. So, quick reminder, if you do enjoy this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. Okay! First of all, we need to really kind of define, well, what makes a Monster Hunter game a Monster Hunter game? And for me, there's generally like 2 or 3 things that are really going to make you feel like you are playing a Monster Hunter game. And those 3 things are the monsters themselves and being able to hunt the monsters in order to make new weapons and armor. The weapons, where in Monster Hunter you choose a weapon type, and each one plays very, very differently. Like, the Great Sword and the Long Sword are both swords, but they are massively different things. Like, the Great Sword is mostly about this ability to kind of charge up blows and hit these super high damaging blows, whereas the Long Sword is much more about kind of doing this draw thing and doing these kind of evade style the things, and then doing crazy anime bullshit. And like the heavy bow gun and the light bow gun are very, very different, where the light bow gun is much more about kind of mobility, and they tend to focus a little bit more on status effects, whereas the heavy bow gun is mostly about, I sit here and I just explode you a lot. So you need to have something that lets you kind of exemplify the unique aspects of your weapon choice. And then the third thing, which I don't think was really, really big in the first Monster Hunter. I've actually never played the first Monster Hunter, but I believe they kind of existed. But the further into the Monster Hunter games you get, the more essential they are. And that is the Palicos and eventually the Palamutes, which Palicos are little feline companions. They are kind of anthropomorphized cats where they look kind of like cats. They're very feline in their appearance, but they walk on two legs and things like that. So they're bipedal instead of quadrupedal, and they're relatively intelligent, but they don't speak other than meow, meow, unless you're playing the Monster Hunter Stories games. I think that's what they're called, in which there's just a random Palico that talks to you in a weird accent. So, so having the ability to bring kind of a pet or something with you is really, really not essential, but definitely kind of important in general. So that being said, what system already contains most of the stuff that we would need to be able to play Monster Hunter on tabletop? And my answer to that is going to be the G.I. Joe RPG by Renegade Studios. Technically, any of the Essence20 RPGs would work because they all use the same basic thing. However, the thing that I think sets G.I. Joe apart from any of the other systems is how heavily reliant it is on the weapon and armor customization system that is built into Essence20. Literally, you could do Power Rangers, you could do Transformers, but they're really, other than like for the dual blades when you go into demon mode, that could kind of be like a morphing style thing, and there definitely isn't any kind of alternate modes built into built into a Monster Hunter. But most definitely the G.I. Joe rolls and the kind of emphasis on your weapons and your armor being a huge part of how you play would mimic the Monster Hunter environment really, really well. The other thing that kind of fits really well for Monster Hunter in general is the Essence20 games are technically a mission-based system. And what I mean by that is, unlike something like Dungeons and Dragons, where you basically have this contiguous story from beginning to end, and there really isn't, like, you'll have downtime and stuff like that, but it's more D&D storytelling tends to operate a little bit more like a novel or a television series. You know, basically you have point A, point B, and there might be breaks in the story, but it is one kind of contiguous story. Whereas the Monster Hunter games, the games themselves are mission-based. You will have your little hub town. You will go to the person that gives out the quest, which is different in every single game. And sometimes it's just a board that you go to. And you'll go there, you'll pick a quest, you'll get your teammates together, and then you'll go out on the quest, which is generally to hunt a monster, but sometimes it's to collect resources and stuff like that. You'll kill the monster, get all the supplies from it, and come on back. And that really is how the Essence20 system is built. You have, and especially G.I. Joe, you are sent out on missions, and these missions may take a fairly long amount of time, or they may be relatively short, but each mission you have requisitions that you can make, and you go out and then you come back, and technically, especially with G.I. Joe, you may not be going out with the same people every single time. You may have different people that you go out, which is very Monster Hunter-esque. So, yeah, I think the G.I. Joe RPG works really, really well for that. So let's talk about specifics and things that you would need to do to be able to do this. So the first thing, again, we have three basic principles that make a Monster Hunter game. And the first one is the monsters. Now, This is where the G.I. Joe RPG is going to come up just a little bit short. And the reason for that is the threats that are in the G.I. Joe RPG are almost exclusively humanoid. And because of that, they're not really going to feel like monsters. Like reskinning Cobra Commander as like a Devil Joe is not really going to feel right. So this is when you have to start getting creative and either creating your own monsters, which Finster's Monstermatic actually has rules for how to create monsters in the Essence20 system. It's specifically designed for Power Rangers, but it can be for anything. So you can do that. You can kind of reverse engineer just by looking at the various stat blocks that already exist and kind of create your own stat blocks. The nice thing about Monster Hunter is every game has a limited set of monsters that you can hunt. And they generally range from anywhere from, I think, like the upper 20s for some of the early titles to like 60 or 70 different large monsters for things like Monster Hunter Generations had a ton of monsters. So the nice thing about Monster Hunter is you're not going to have to be making tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of threats. Because a lot of them are going to be recycled because that's how Monster Hunter works. So you might start out with like creating a great Jagras monster and the players might have to hunt that one a few times, or making a Nargacuga or anything like that. But once you create that monster, you'll be able to reuse it over and over again because they'll have to go back to back to rehunt it if we really want to feel like Monster Hunters to get all of the supplies that they need and the parts that they need to create their new weapons and armor. And the thing that's going to make it more interesting is going to be varying where they fight these monsters. And so most definitely you're going to want to use maps for this. And those you're probably going to want to either make yourselves or, find some of the maps from the Monster Hunter games and just find a way to kind of digitize them. Chop them up into little bits and then put them on a grid. And you can use those without having to get too creative. But heavily use the terrain and everything like that, because that's what makes Monster Hunter games most interesting. If you don't want to be building your own monsters, I would probably recommend either going with Transformers threats because they're already large and kind of intimidating, or Power Rangers the threats because those become a little bit more monster-like as opposed to the very humanoid things that you would be dealing with for G.I. Joe. Either one of those would work really well. In the Cobra Codex, they do have some more monstrous versions of creatures. So the Cobra Codex might have a few things. And most definitely, the humanoid ones you can kind of reskin the humanoid ones to be like the small monsters that you're going to be dealing with, like, Jaggy Eyes, I think is what they're called, and Zamels and all those little smaller monsters that you have to hunt for, various other parts. And so just starting with that, that already gives you a pretty good spot to be able to start running. And the nice thing about a tabletop RPG versus a video game is the idea that whereas a hunt in Monster Hunter might take, like, if you have a really inexperienced group, it might take 20 or 30 minutes to do a hunt. For a tabletop RPG, your session, like a complete session, is going to be a hunt. and then if you take, if you take, what's the word I'm thinking of? Inspiration from things like Monster Hunter World. Not so much Monster Hunter Rise, because they kind of dropped the story for a more kind of classic Monster Hunter experience. But Monster Hunter World, you have this really interesting story that every time you hunt a new monster, most of the time you hunt a new monster, the reason you're doing it is there's a specific thing that's happening, because the whole plot of Monster Hunter World, spoiler alert, the whole plot of Monster Hunter World is you go to this new world, and there is this giant, like, mountain-sized, or I guess more like building-sized monster that is going to this new world, and you're basically kind of tracking it to find out exactly what it's doing and what's going on. And so in order to track it, you keep running into problems like, oh no, this huge monster is harassing the base. We need to take it out so that we can continue setting up for this. Or, hey, we found this new area. Why don't you guys go and scout it? And while you're down there, an Otogaron just shows up and almost chomps your face off. Or, oh no, we found Nergigante and it's guarding the last place that we need to go. You need to go hunt that. So you can definitely do a more kind of classic Monster Hunter story where it's basically like, okay, now we've opened up rank 4 hunts for you, and you have even more monsters that you can try and hunt. Or you could go for a more Monster Hunter World style adventure where each new required hunt is actually based on a continuous story that's kind of going on. And then as far as, killing monsters to build items, that is relatively simple. Again, the DM is going to have to put a little bit of extra work into this, but after you've kind of made your monster stat blocks, the way that most weapons and armor work, other than the kind of fashion aspect of it, and fashion is big in Monster Hunter World, because who the hell cares if, you're taking down skyscraper-sized monsters if you don't look badass doing it. The nice thing about tabletop RPGs is you can look however you want. So fashion's already set. But the other thing that all the armor sets and the weapons do is something about the monster is represented in the weapons. So like Brachiodos weapons, Brachiodos has this slime that it puts on stuff that the slime is explosive, and so it'll hit you and then explode. So as the GM, after you have a monster, pick out something from the monster. Maybe it's a poison style monster, so you have poison built into the weapon, or maybe it's you're fighting I can't remember any of the monsters in my head. Any of the names of the monsters. Maybe you're fighting a Rathalos. Really, really classic, basic dragon-style monster. Fighting a Rathian, and so the weapons that you get, Rathian weapons, are always fire-based. So maybe they all do fire-type damage and the things like that. And then the other thing you need to do is, and this can be as easy as just going to a wiki and looking up the various things that can drop off of different monsters. And all of the things that can drop off of different monsters have percentages. So it would be very, very simple to, instead of just doing percentages, you can simply just assign them values on a D100 roll. And you can use the percentages if you want. You can make up your own percentages however you want to do it. But then whenever they try to carve on the monster, or if they capture the monster, because I think both of those things are very, very possible in the Essence20 system, and you basically would just have to kind of decide, like, I would say, like, capturing monsters would require you to use a kit that would be the kit would be one of the traps, and you would have to do stun damage to it in some way. We can use stun damage as a way to mimic tranquilizer bombs and tranquilizer shots. And so, if you wanted to capture it, you could do it that way, and you'll get different things if you capture it. And again, all of this stuff already exists in the various Monster Hunter games. You'll get different things if you capture it versus if you try to carve it. Depending on where you carve, sometimes you can get different things. All of that information already exists. You're not going to have to make it your own. You're just going to have to do some minor modifications to turn it into what it is. And then you just assign particular components required to be able to requisition them at the beginning of a mission. One of the things I might change, just because this is how Monster Hunter works, is normally in Monster Hunter, once you build something, you have it, and you go through upgrading it and things like that. The upgrade system generally will just make it stronger, but generally the weapons do the same thing, they just do more of it. And since making things stronger in the Essence20 system is based a little bit more on your a little bit more on your level than it is on just upgrading your weapons and things like that. I might go as far as to say once you requisition something once, you have that item available to you, but you have to succeed on requisition again. And again, you have to have the right components to do it. I think that's a nice little middle ground to make sure that it still feels like Monster Hunter, but it also isn't something where every single time you want to use, maybe an Otogaran light bowgun, you don't have to go and rehunt it over and over and over again to get it. But yeah, that really kind of takes care of the monster hunting portion of it. And again, there's already so much stuff out there based on wikis and other stuff from like mega fans just learning how the games work, that the only thing that you're really going to have to do as a game master is you're going to have to either build the stat blocks or find stat blocks that already exist that you can modify to play a little bit more like that. And then you're going to have to find basically loot tables and translate them into like D100 rolls would probably be the easiest thing. And then you could even use the already created parts tables, the upgrade tables that are found in whichever game that you want to emulate. So not a ton of really hard work for the GM. So moving on. The next thing we need to talk about the weapons. Weapons are what make Monster Hunter as enjoyable as it is and as replayable as it is. I have beaten Monster Hunter Generations. I made it through the main story. I didn't get through all the crazy end game and G rank hunts because I just wasn't that good at it, and I really wasn't a huge fan of the 3DS for Monster Hunter because it was just really hard to use. And then Monster Hunter World, I did just about everything. I went all the way through Iceborne, had a lot of fun. Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak, I went through almost everything. I made it through the main story of Sunbreak, and then I didn't really do a whole lot of the G rank stuff. But with all those things, I would normally pick a single weapon to kind of main for my first time through the campaign. And then I would go back and try the different weapons. For World, I was an Insect Glaive main, which was really fun. I love the Insect Glaive. And then partway through, I found out they had special armor that made you look like Dante from Devil May Cry. And the weapon that went with that special armor was actually a charge blade. And the charge blade is this crazy complicated thing, but it's lots of fun. And so I started doing Charge Blade, and then I went back to Monster Hunter Generations because I was bored, and I got Generations Ultimate on Switch. And in Generations, I can't remember if they still have it in Generations Ultimate. They had a special quest you could do that would give you special armor that made you look like Samus from Metroid, and there was a light bowgun that came with it. That was the her arm cannon, and so I started doing light bowgun stuff for that, and then I did light bowgun in Monster Hunter World because it's really fun in Monster Hunter World, and I am currently replaying Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise using light bowguns because light bowgun is really really fun. So so those are the various weapons that and then for the first time I played through Generations, I was a dual blade main, and the first time I played Rise, I was a dual blade main because aerial dual blades rock. And yeah, jumping into the air and go spitty, 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 spitty. Like, that was really, really fun. And that was the thing that hooked me in the original Monster Hunter Generations, just going around. That and Tetsukabra is the greatest monster ever. That, Tetsukabra and the green insect dragon that was one of the four big monsters in Monster Hunter Generations that I can't remember his name right now. But that green dragon thing was super, super cool, and the armor was amazing. So anyway, how are we going to represent the weapons? Well, first of all, we already have a ton of different weapons that exist in the Essence20 system. There is just, the equipment section is amazing. And again, with G.I. Joe, you also have battle dress, which is how you're going to kind of mimic the skills and everything that are built into armor. It's going to be upgrades to your battle dress. But I mean, with the weapons, you already have things like close combat blade and bludgeon and shotgun and rifle, and that will do a lot of things. But to get more interesting things like a great sword build might use a close combat heavy blade, whereas the Incept glaive might be a close combat heavy bludgeon, or a long blade might be what you use for the long sword. However, that doesn't really hold, please. I had to change things so I can see things the way they're supposed to be. It doesn't really completely mimic what it is, because the weapons are not just their attacks. They interact with everything differently. Like I said, heavy bowgun and bowgun are both bowguns. They're both basically just guns that you shoot. But they have very, very different roles in the game. The heavy bowgun is much more about finding a spot, sitting down, and just unloading really powerful attacks. Whereas the light bowgun is a lot more about moving around a lot, using elemental attacks, and using using status effect the things to paralyze or poison, things like that. So the way that we're going to be able to mimic that is in the roles. Now, in the G.I. Joe core book, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they have 7 different roles in the G.I. Joe core book. However, each one of those roles generally has 2 or 3. I think they all have 3 different focuses that you can choose from that's going to kind of change how things work. I'm not going to go through every single weapon because I think there's either 11 or 13 different weapons now, and that would make this video much longer than I have the time or the energy to do. But I'm going to focus on a couple just to kind of give you guys an idea. Another reason is I haven't played all the weapons. Again, I know dual blades roll well. I know the insect glaive, I know the charge blade, and I know the light bowgun. And that's about it. I've played a little bit with the longsword. I have never touched the hammer. I've never touched either of the lances. and I have never touched the great sword. Nor have I ever played around with the hunting horn, but I know the hunting horn relatively well just because it's the joke. And having a hunting horn in your party is really, really nice. I love the hunting horn. I just never play it. So, the way that you're going to be able to kind of mimic the different weapons is going to be obviously choosing your weapon type, but then also choosing a role that's going to exemplify what your weapon main is really about. And the only kind of limitation you're going to have that doesn't really exist in the Monster Hunter games is the fact that in the Monster Hunter games, if you want to change weapons, it's as easy as build a new weapon. And that's all you have to do. There's no stats or anything that you have to change or anything. Monster Hunter is not an RPG in that aspect, but it does mean that this game you are going to be much more kind of locked into your main, which in practice is not that uncommon. A lot of Monster Hunter players will just have a single weapon that they use throughout the entire game, and maybe they'll play it again and choose a different weapon. They'll be using the same character, but they'll change weapons or something like that. But for the most part, people get good at like one or two weapons and then will play around with other ones. So in that aspect, this isn't going to be that crazy. So for the first weapon, I want to kind of give an example for. We're going to go with the light bowgun because, again, I've been playing that a lot recently. And so to kind of replicate the light bowgun, I think the ranger role actually works really well. And it's not just because the ranger has a big gun. There's aspects of the ranger that just kind of fit in to the idea of the light bowgun. Again, the thing that the light bowgun excels at is, first of all, they get rapid shot, where the heavy bowgun doesn't. And rapid shot just means that for one ammo, you shoot 3 of them. And a lot of people would think, well, yeah, that means damage is amazing. Light bowguns they do damage, don't get me wrong. But the thing where they excel the most at is if you can rapid fire things like piercing rounds, shotgun rounds, or any of the status effect rounds, because then you can stack these things really well. And things like piercing and shotgun are great for breaking parts. Same is true about slashing rounds. And so that's really what a lot of light bowgun players do, and that's kind of what you're getting with the ranger. You have your environmental expert Tis, which is basically just going to make you more mobile, which again is a thing that light bowguns tend to do, especially in comparison to heavy bowguns. And then you have the environmental exposure aspect that you get at 2nd level, which gives you a bunch of just different things that you can kind of pick from. And you have and you eventually get the ability to forage. And forage is very, very Monster Hunter-esque, especially since one of the other things that I think both light and heavy bowgun users do is you have a limited amount of ammo in Monster Hunter. And sometimes the monsters are strong enough that you can like completely blow through one of your ammo types, the most effective ammo type for that particular creature. And so what you tend to do is you will bring the raw materials that you need in your pack with you, because you can only carry so much ammo in your pack, but you can also carry raw materials. And so you would bring the raw materials with you so that once you run out, you would just craft more ammo right in the environment. And so that kind of forage ability works pretty well to kind of mimic how both light and heavy bowgun users tend to do things. And then you have things like Kit Basher, which is one of the environmental exposure things where you can basically forage for and use a kit even if you don't meet its prereqs. kits are going to give you a lot of different benefits that you normally wouldn't be able to do. And so that's going to give you that kind of versatility. And then you also have things like Natural Medic, one of the things that light bowgun users can do, and I think heavy bowgun too. I've never played heavy bowgun, so I don't know about this. But I know light bowgun users can get heal rounds, and so one of the things you can do here is Natural Medic. You can specialize in medicine as a survival specialization and use that specialization to treat damage, to regain health, or essence points. So you can kind of be the healer on the team, and a bunch of other things. The other thing that's kind of nice, one of the environmental exposure things you can get is Beast. Again, in later Monster Hunter games, your Palico or Palamute, once you get to Monster Hunter Rise, actually goes with you on hunts and can actually be really, really useful. So the Beast environmental exposure basically gives you an animal pet. And that you can use to basically mimic your Palico or Palamute as part of your class. Now, when we start looking into the focuses, there are 3 focuses. There's the Beastmaster, there's the Predator, and the Scout. And the Beastmaster, if you really want to kind of give that feeling, especially true in Monster Hunter Rise, where even if you have a full party, you and either a Palamute or a Palico will be there. So you'll have 4 hunters and then also 4 Palicos or Palamutes. The Beastmaster can really, really give you that feeling of you're fighting right alongside your Palico or Palamute. The Predator feels very Hunter-esque for doing things, and you might even be able to use the Predator more to mimic the heavy bowgun playstyle, just because it has a much higher emphasis on just doing a lot more damage. It does. I mean, like the Predator is effectively your rogue. So you do get sneak attack and the things like that, but you also get like +1 bonus to all your defenses at level 10. So Predator can kind of go either way, and then Scout again is going to emphasize that more mobility based thing and that more kind of information support that sometimes light bowgun users do. Though, to be perfectly honest, information is not nearly as difficult to find in the Monster Hunter games. You just go to a wiki, or the later ones, you can just go to your Hunter notes and find everything, including the drop tables. So, yeah, but if you do want to be more of that kind of scout person, especially if you go back into the earlier Monster Hunter games before the monsters would show up on the map, you would have to first find them, and generally what you would do is you would mark them with a paintball, which would allow everyone to be able to see them. Eventually, you played them long enough, you would know where the monsters always spawned, so it wasn't very difficult to find them. But the scout would kind of replicate that early aspect of Monster Hunter games where you had to actually go out and find the monster, or if you're looking at Monster Hunter World, using your scout flies and using your tracking and other things like that, the scout would really excel at that. So the next thing I want to talk about, we got to talk about the hunting horn. Hunting horn does not get anywhere near enough love. Excuse me. Hunting horn doesn't get anywhere near enough love. It's kind of treated as a joke a lot of times in the Monster Hunter community. But it is absolutely massively useful. The way Hunting Horn works is every time they make an attack, they're actually playing a note. And depending on which attacks they kind of mix together, they can play these songs, and different songs do different things. Like some will give you extra stamina regeneration, some will regain your hit points. Some will make you do more damage or take less damage. Will give you elemental resistance. They're really, really useful, but they are hyper support based. They can do some decent damage, especially once you start getting to Rise, and some of the switch skills that they give them are really, really nice. But their emphasis is on support first. And the technician for G.I. Joe fills that role super, super well. And again, one of the things that you get as just being a technician is you get a primary tech. Armor, again, just fits really, really well for this. You can have gear or weapon, which, again, they make sense. But you can also have a drone, which is a robotic pet, but you very easily could reskin that into being either your Palico or your Palamute. And so have that extra aspect built into it is always really fun. And then the rest of it, again, depending on your focus, you eventually get abilities like support, where you can just give one of your upgrades for free to another ally. Yeah, and then it just gets bigger and bigger and cooler things. Once you start looking at the focuses is when you start seeing kind of the different ways that you're going to kind of focus on helping people. So if you look at the expert, your expert is going to be focused a little bit more in a Monster Hunter style game. Your expert is going to be focused a little bit more on kind of that tracking aspect, where you are able to help your allies find things and learn things more easily. Basically, your influential feature is your allies gain an upshift 1 in skill tests related to your field. And yeah, your expert is literally going to be that. They're going to be great at support for skills and other things like that. So being creative with how you use all of your different abilities is going to be the most useful things you can do. Whereas if you go with Think Tech, you very quickly can kind of change from a very support focused character to a much more, like, the Think Tank really feels a little bit more heavy bowgun-esque, because it's a lot more about just being big and tough and killing stuff. So that, again, choosing your focus is going to massively to change how things work. And if you go Tinkerer, that's where you're going to have the most kind of versatility, because you can do Kit Bash upgrade, where you can just kind of randomly upgrade your equipment. And then Kit Bash equipment, you can basically just mace things out in the field to kind of help and support your team. So yeah. And then final one I want to talk about, again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but if we look at the Commando, again, the first game that I spent a ton of time in was Monster Hunter Generations, and I was a dual blade user. I was an aerial dual blade user, and so we got to talk about the dual blades. The dual blades are hyper movement and lots of damage, and the Commando fits that super well. Doing two weapon fighting kind of stuff. They get sneak attack, which can very easily be translated to demon dance and stuff like that. They are the rogues of the Essence20 system. And then things like mobility. Once per turn, you may now sprint or hide as a free action. So one of the things that happens when you go in to demon mode is your speed increases and your dodge changes from this little kind of like jump roll thing to this super fast dash. And part of playing the dual blades well is learning how to use that dash to get you exactly where you want to unleash all of your attacks and cutting off tails and things like that. The other thing that is kind of cool, they have a takedown ability. You make a special attack to incapacitate enemies as a standard action. So that's basically your capture mechanic. And everything's a weapon. Starting at 12th level, you may sneak attack with any weapon. You know, things like that. It's just very, very damage focused, and that's what you do. And then to get the kind of full feeling of the dual blades, especially if you're doing either generations or the aerial generations or the Monster Hunter Rise version that basically brings back the aerial dual blades, the Infiltrator focus really gives you that thing where you have things like wire work. You get a climb movement equal to your ground movement. You do have to roll a skill test to climb most surfaces, which is very Monster Hunter Rise-esque. And you may use acrobatics in place of athletics. So you become hyper speed focused. And you consider all jumps to be running jumps, even if you haven't moved, and you jump 50% higher and farther. Just that stuff alone gives you that feeling of I'm hyper mobile. Mix it with some weapons, and you will feel like you are playing playing a dual blade user. The sniper is not going to be very useful for playing a dual blade. But again, you could definitely make you could actually make a pretty good bow user from sniper, because bows are kind of about the damage, but they're also about, you know, kind of setting up the right shot and doing cool shit. I've never played the bow, but one of my streamer buddies, Jeff Brutleg, he was playing, I can't remember if it was Rise or World, but he got into Monster Hunter and he was a bow user and he did really well. I was impressed with it. So Sniper would probably be a little more for like bow. And then Spy, I don't think translates super well to a specific weapon, but could be used for a lot of different things. So those are just 3 examples of ways that you could create how the weapons play by using the roles. The origins and influences are going to be useful as well, but they're going to be a lot more useful in the tracking aspect of the hunting, because they don't generally give you combat abilities. And Monster Hunter in and of itself is a combat game. So the origin the role is going to be the thing that most feels like your is going to most feel like your weapon. And then all of them get lots of general perks. And so things like Animal Pet, if you just want to have a Palico go with you, you need animal handling at least a D4. So just 1 point in animal handling will let you be able or no, 2 points, sorry, because D2 starts. So 2 points in animal handling will allow you to take the Animal Pet general perk, and that will give you your Palico or Palamute. So any character can have that if they want it, but they don't have to use it, which is very Monster Hunter-esque. Then things like cross-trading it's basically their version of multi-classing, can allow you to kind of really customize to make it feel the most like the thing. Heavy armor training is definitely going to make things like the lance or the gun lance feel much more, defensive like they are. I mean, the lances, lance players basically just sit there and poke things behind their shields for a long time. And yeah, so just going through the various the various other general perks will allow you to kind of really customize your thing. So overall, that's how I would create a Monster Hunter tabletop RPG without having to create a brand new system. The Essence20 system, I think, works really well because of the upgrade system for the equipment. It's very, very easy to mimic being able to hunt monsters and bring them back for new gear. But in addition to that, you already have a pet system built in here to allow for really cool a really cool ability to mimic the Palico Palamute system. And the roles themselves and the emphasis on equipment and battle dress in the G.I. Joe RPG makes it very easy to mimic the feeling of each one of the different weapons in the Monster Hunters as a series, and just makes you feel really cool. And if you want to get really, really crazy, you can create new weapons. Things like I think it's the Frontier series, which I don't think we really ever get in the US. I think they're Japanese exclusive, have added a bunch of other weapons that have never showed up in the West. Things like there was these cool Tonfa things that you had, and there was this other one that was kind of like a giant axe that you could throw, if I can remember correctly. There's really cool weapons that have never appeared in the Western releases of Monster Hunter. And I would love the next Monster Hunter Wild, I would love for them to introduce a new... What I'd really like for them to introduce is a monk weapon. Like, give us the ability to just wear massive gauntlets. It'll do blunt damage so it can break shit. And I would love to just go into battle with massive gauntlets, or bring the Tonfas in. I can't remember what they're called in Frontier, but they have these Tonfa weapons, which are... They play kind of similar to dual blades, but dual blades do slashing damage and they do blunt damage, so they work differently. And they have like rockets in them, so you can like hit them in the ground and like launch you into the air. They're super cool. I can't remember what they're called, but I would love to see that. And you could definitely do that. You could create your own nonsense weapons in an Essence20 game or a G.I. Joe game that we've turned into Monster Hunter, and just have a lot of fun. Like I said, everything else already really exists. You're really only going to have to create a system for how you get monster parts, which is basically as simple as going to one of the wikis, looking at the drop tables, and assigning numbers on to a D100, and then rolling every time they either capture something or having the players themselves roll, because then it'll feel like they're carving it, and each player gets their own drops, and then assigning part requirements to various upgrades, and maybe grouping upgrades together to create the various different weapons, as opposed to the kind of menu system that they use now, where you basically just pick the upgrades that you want. You would basically just have to kind of create the different weapons and go, if you want this particular weapon, it has these particular upgrades, which again is already something that you can do in the Essence20 system. And then you just have to assign parts. So yeah, overall, I think this would be really cool. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think. First of all, are you Monster Hunter fans? And if so, what's your weapon? Again, I was dual blade main, and then I went Inset Glaive, which I still love, and now I'm playing a lot with either Charge Blade or Light Bowgun. But let me know which weapons you main down there, and let me know what you think of a Monster Hunter tabletop RPG. Otherwise, again, that's going to be all for me today, and I'll see you guys in the next time. Bye-bye!